Let me tell you about one of the most unbelievable moments in all of World War II. It's the story of a single American sergeant who, staring down an entire enemy company with absolutely no way out, did the one thing that made no sense at all. He laughed.
So picture this. It's late afternoon on January 29, 1945. We're in a little village in Belgium called Holzheim. It's freezing, there's snow everywhere, and the war is in its final, ugliest stages. The fighting is just brutal, street to street, house to house.
And in the middle of all this chaos, an American sergeant rounds the corner of a building and just freezes, because he is staring at 90 German soldiers. Now, these guys were actually prisoners just a few minutes ago, captured by his own unit, but a German patrol showed up, freed them, and now they're grabbing their weapons again, getting ready to fight.
And who's facing this small, rearming army? Just one guy, First Sergeant Leonard Funk. He'd come to check on the prisoners, only to walk right into a trap. His own men who were guarding them are now prisoners themselves, and he is totally, completely alone. A German officer walks right up to him, shoves an MP-40 submachine gun right into his stomach, and just starts screaming at him in German. The message is pretty clear: surrender or die. And, the same thing to do is to put your hands up, right? But Leonard Funk looks at the officer, he looks at the 90 guns all pointed at him, and he starts to laugh. And that laugh, that's what this whole story is about.
To get why he laughed, you really have to understand the man himself. This wasn't just some crazy, reckless impulse. It was the product of a lifetime of experiences that had forged him into something, well, something different. So let's rewind a bit.
Now, if you saw Leonard Funk on the street, you wouldn't think war hero. He was 5'5", weighed about 140 pounds, and came from a gritty steel town outside Pittsburgh. He was a product of the Great Depression, a serious, responsible guy who looked after his family. When he got drafted, you'd think the Army would stick him behind a desk somewhere. Man, were they wrong.
Because this quiet guy from Pennsylvania went and volunteered for what was basically a death wish. See, in 1941, the paratroopers were this new, experimental, and terrifying idea. Jump out of a perfectly good airplane, behind enemy lines, surrounded. The training was so brutal it was designed to break you. And it did, for about half the guys who tried. But Funk, he sailed right through it. He chose the most dangerous job he could find. And you have to understand, that moment in Holzheim wasn't a fluke. It wasn't some random act. It was just the next logical step on a path of unbelievable courage that he'd been walking through the war's absolute worst battles.
Just look at his resume. He jumped into Normandy on D-Day. He jumped into Holland for Operation Market Garden, that huge, disastrous airborne assault. And he fought through the frozen nightmare that was the Battle of the Bulge. By the time 1945 rolled around, Leonard Funk had seen more combat than most people could even imagine.
Let's just take D-Day. His jump was a total mess. He lands 40 miles off target and wrecks his ankle. But does he sit and wait for a medic? Nope. He finds 18 other guys who are just as lost as he is. And for the next 10 days, limping in agony, he acts as their scout, leading them through German-held territory. And the result? Every last one of them got back safely. He got the Silver Star for that.
Then you have Holland. Funk spots these 3 German anti-aircraft guns just tearing Allied gliders to pieces as they're trying to land. He grabs 3 other guys to go take them out. Now think about those odds. It's 4 Americans against 20 Germans dug into a fortified position. The Army playbook says you attack when you have 3-to-1 odds in your favor. Funk had the complete opposite. He didn't care. He led a frontal charge and they took out all 3 guns. For that, he earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal for bravery in the country.
So, okay, we've got a guy who is tough as nails, a natural leader, and maybe a little bit crazy. But there was one specific event that hardened him, that really cemented his mindset, and it's the absolute key to understanding that laugh.
It was the Malmedy Massacre. During the Battle of the Bulge, word got out that an SS unit had captured a bunch of Americans, lined them up in a field, and just gunned them down. 84 unarmed prisoners of war, murdered. For soldiers like Funk, hearing this, it changed the game. Any unspoken rules of war, any idea that you could surrender and be treated fairly, that was all gone.
And right then and there, Leonard Funk made a vow to himself, a promise, written in stone. No matter what happened, no matter the odds, he would never, ever surrender to the Germans. That wasn't just tough talk. It was a cold, calculated decision that would directly lead to what happened in that Belgian farmhouse.
Which brings us right back to Holzheim. So now we know who's really standing there. We know his history, we know his incredible bravery, And most importantly, we know about his vow. This isn't just a sergeant cornered. This is a man who has already decided he'd rather die fighting than raise his hands.
So let's run it back. The German officer is yelling his head off. The gun is digging into Funk's stomach. Funk can't understand a single word. He just sees his 4 guys on the ground, captured, and a whole company of Germans about to kill them all. The chances of survival are, well, they're 0. He actually yells over to his men, "I don't understand what he's saying." And in that moment of total absurdity, he laughs. Maybe it was a nervous reaction, maybe it was a tactic, or maybe it was just the only response a man who's already vowed to never surrender could have. But whatever it was, it completely scrambled the German officer's brain. He's enraged, sure, but he's also confused. This is not how a man about to die is supposed to act.
And that brief moment of confusion was everything. Funk saw his chance. He starts to act like he's surrendering, slowly reaching to take his Thompson submachine gun off his shoulder. For a split second, the German officer relaxes, thinking he's won. And that's when Funk moved. In one fast, fluid motion, he swings that Thompson into position and opens fire.
What happened next was just carnage. The German officer went down instantly. Funk emptied his entire magazine, slammed in a new one, and kept firing, all while his own men were scrambling for dropped weapons and joining the fight. The whole thing was over in less than a minute. When the smoke cleared, 21 Germans were dead, 24 more were wounded, and the rest just gave up again. And after all that, after pulling off this legendary feat of arms, what does Funk say? He stands there, smoke curling from his gun, looks at his guys and says, "That was the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen." I mean, what a perfect summary from a guy who was all action and no talk.
But you know, the story doesn't end there, because what happened after the war is in its own way almost as remarkable. You'd think a guy like this, a living legend, would have spent the rest of his life in the spotlight, but that just wasn't him. I mean, look at this list of medals. The Medal of Honor for what he did at Holtzheim, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, not to mention the highest honors from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. He was, officially, the most decorated paratrooper of World War II, an absolute giant of the war.
But that legendary warrior basically lived 2 different lives. After the war, he went home, put all those medals away, and got a job as a clerk at the Veterans Administration. For 27 years, the man who single-handedly took on an enemy company spent his days quietly helping other veterans get their benefits. He almost never talked about the war. He just went back to being that responsible, quiet guy from his hometown.
You know, when President Truman gave Funk the Medal of Honor, he looked at him and said, "I would rather have this medal than be President of the United States." Think about that. The most powerful man in the world saying he would trade it all for the kind of courage that lived inside this quiet 5'5" clerk from a steel town. That really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's true strength? Is it the power you have over others, or is it the power you have over yourself when you have nothing left?